Glad you could join us. Before we dive into our first presentation, let me just take a minute and talk to you about a question you might have around the significance of the phrase revolution of the senses. Of course, we all know that hearing is one of the 5 senses, but we probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about how our sense of hearing relates to touch, smell, taste, and sight. It was Aristotle who first described the 5 senses and postulated that we don't experience our senses peripherally. Touch doesn't happen in our fingertips, vision doesn't happen in our eyes, and hearing doesn't take place in our ears. In fact, he called them imaginations because he was the first to make the connection between our sense organs and our minds. Now, this gathering of inputs is not passive. In fact, it's very active. Furthermore, this process of sensory input is highly individualized. No 2 people hear or see or experience the world exactly the same way. Our preferences are shaped by our physiology, past experiences, even culture. Connecting to the world through all 5 senses, being able to focus on, say, the magnificent mountain or the valley in the distance, and then the fly buzzing in the room. All this versatility, as Aristotle correctly guessed, happens in our minds. That's what brain hearing is all about, giving your patients the auditory signal they need to process the world more naturally. It is so important that we get it right, all of us, not just to address the hearing loss as it's represented on an audiogram, but also for the individual. It's not about fitting a device to a hearing loss, but rather re-engaging your patients in the full range of sensory experiences through new technologies and innovations made available by Oticon. So you'll hear about the advances represented through the new IniumSense platform, and you'll also hear about the concepts that informed and shaped them. So let's get started. On this webpage, I'm sure you've seen a lot of impressive stats, like 96% patient satisfaction or 30% more processing power. In the next video, Dr. Sheena Oliver, Vice President of Marketing, speaks with a panel of experts about what's behind these numbers and how they translate into true benefits both for you and your patient. Dr. Sheena Oliver.
I think one thing that we can all agree upon is that in our profession, we're constantly being challenged to justify the benefit of hearing devices. And as hearing care professionals, you have to be able to differentiate yourself. You need to stand out. One way of doing that is to reframe the conversation. Reframe the conversation that you're having with patients from one that's centered mostly on price and technology to one that's centered more on improving that patient's quality of life because they can hear better. Because after all, that is what you do, and that's what you do every day, and that's what's going to set you apart. All of the technological enhancements that you're going to hear about this weekend, the improved processing power, the intelligent design, matter only if and when your patients are open and receptive to you helping them find a solution that's been uniquely personalized for their needs. Another key message that we've found that resonates extremely well with patients is this idea of hearing care as health care. People understand that. And I think they understand it because it's so simple. It also helps to remove that stigma or the sting that can so often be associated with hearing loss. When you're able to successfully connect with your patients because you've redirected that conversation to issues that really matter to them, then something really profound is able to happen. Because you're no longer a commodity, right? You now are bringing value, and you're differentiating yourself from your competitors. So thank you, everybody, for agreeing to be with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Sheena.
Now, the video we saw a few moments ago had a lot of information in there. I think it was a great teaser for our audience. But I want to know who wants to start out with telling us what's new.
I'll start since I came last. I'll go first. How about that? So as everybody saw, we have 3 new products, the Alta 2, the Nero 2, and the Rio 2. And this represents the next generation of a brain hearing technology. And what you're going to see is that it's all powered by the new IniumSense platform. But what's really cool and a first for us is that we're launching all products at all levels all at the same time. So it's a very, very comprehensive launch.
So it is. So I want to back up because there are a lot of things that you just mentioned in that. And I think the one thing is brain hearing technology, because I suspect that that could be new for a lot of people in our audience. So who wants to talk a little bit more about what brain hearing technology is?
I'll take that, Sheena. You know, I think we can all agree that hearing is a cognitive process that actually takes place in the brain. The fewer details of sound the brain receives, the harder it has to do to make intelligence of the information it's receiving, the harder it has to work. You know, this can not only impact the patient by making the patient more tired during the course of the day, but also other cognitive systems like memory and the ability to engage in conversation. Our goal is to provide better hearing with less effort by supporting how the brain makes sense of sound.
I want to switch topics a little bit and talk about platforms, because I think this is a term that is used in our profession quite frequently, but I think everyone has a different definition or understanding of what that means. Kelly, can you talk specifically about the new InEumSense platform and what that means for hearing care professionals?
Well, sure. Well, to start with, anytime you develop a new platform, your primary goal is to increase processing power. Because once you increase processing power, it gives us that capability to have all the new advanced technologies in our devices. And to be quite honest, not every manufacturer can't do everything. So you have to be very smart in what you do with the processing power that you have.
We know that people with hearing loss perceive sound differently, and also people with hearing loss vary tremendously in how they perceive soft sounds. Unfortunately, most devices on the market today can simply not account for those individual variations in the perception of sound. But when you have a way to assess that and account for that, the result is that you can improve speech understanding. With our new platform, we can do this. Oticon's Soft Speech Booster is more likely to get gain right for the soft parts of speech.
So you mentioned Soft Speech Booster, but can you talk a little bit more about what it actually is and what it does?
You know, it's actually part of our personalization process in our Genie fitting software. We're able to assess the patient's perception of soft sounds by using a question and a sound sample. Based on the results, we can actually increase the amount of soft gain by at least 3 dB for sounds over 1500 hertz. Some patients may be more, some patients may be less, again, based on their perceptual needs. The reason why this is so significant is because soft speech sounds are present in about 75% of everyday listening situations, not just one-on-one conversations in quiet.
What you say about getting access for the soft speech, I think that's another reason to really understand how a feedback system works. Because sometimes those feedback systems actually work against the hearing care professional's goal of achieving that audibility of the soft sounds.
How is that so, Callie? I'm not sure I'm following you.
You know, we've always known that giving the patient greater access to all those soft speech details was important, but you really need a state-of-the-art feedback system to handle it. And it's not always transparent what's happening in feedback systems. You know, it's not like your patient's going to run in and say, hey, the feedback system is messing up my hearing. They're going to come in with, issues of not understanding and noise or things not being clear. And you start fine-tuning for those sorts of complaints when it's actually something that's the result of the feedback system. But if you don't fine-tune, then those devices are coming back, so you get in that vicious cycle of trying to fix it.
The main goal of a feedback manager is not just about eliminating feedback. We have to ensure that the instruments can detect feedback faster and eliminate it faster, but at the same time not compromise sound quality, speech clarity, and audibility.
So Stephen, you talked a little bit about rebuilding the system. What exactly did we do in that rebuilding?
Yeah, we had to really start with where Stephen had just mentioned, and that is simultaneously optimize those 3 parameters of having the performance, having the sound quality, and having and maintaining the audibility. So just going to get a little technical here for a moment.
Oh boy.
There are 3 components to that feedback system itself, and that is the phase inversion, a very slight frequency shift, and then also the gain management component as well. And with phase inversion, as you might even see up on the screen here, phase inversion is taking that problematic signal and about 180 degrees out of phase, you're going to cancel that out. In order for this to work, it has to be very, very quick, and it has to constantly be monitoring for these types of things happening within the system.
But Jason, you mentioned constantly, and I would, the one thing that popped in my head is that has to have a negative impact on sound quality if it's running all the time.
Well, it can, I think that's why you've got to make sure you do it the right way. If it's okay if I get technical.
I guess.
Okay.
I thought I was the guy, but all right.
All right.
Go ahead.
So, but obviously you mentioned frequency shifting, and that's the second line of defense, and it's important how quickly and how accurately that works. So, if the phase inversion isn't enough to deal with it, what's going to happen is in the high frequencies, we're going to shift things just about 10 hertz momentarily, just enough to cut that feedback loop off. But it's not enough to alter the overall sound quality, but it's really, really effective at controlling the feedback.
Are there any other audiological improvements that we need to know about that are going to be realized by the patient?
You know, what comes to mind to me is our new tinnitus solution called Tinnitus Sound Support. As it's another component that builds upon our brain hearing approach. As you know, tinnitus is often associated with hearing loss, and it's primarily the brain's reaction to the loss of normal input from the ear. So it's like the brain is making up a perception of sound when the input to the brain is either missing or altered. So again, it all starts with the brain, and that's simply fundamental to how we approach signal processing when it comes to tinnitus.
Absolutely, and tinnitus sound support also provides the sounds according to the patient's listening preferences, because we know they're very sensitive to sound. So this way, it reduces that starkness of that tinnitus in the auditory brain. And the other very unique thing in these devices is that in addition to the broadband sounds that we're all pretty familiar with, we've introduced 3 ocean sounds, which are very soothing and clinically proven to reduce that annoyance of the tinnitus.
To zero in on this, when you sit there and you have the patient in front of you and the instruments are in the ear, muted, it could be a new patient, could be an existing patient, looking to try something new, and you've done the personalization process and you have preset that instrument with the patient's specific listening needs and preferences. And that magic moment when you unmute and the patient's eyes light up and they've opened up to a new world of sound, the confidence you have that you've done the best you can to make that initial experience the best it can be.
Good job. You know, we go through our lives each and every day engaged in our world, with our family members, with our friends, and we do that through our 5 senses. But I want you to think about a baby for a minute, the birth of a baby. At birth, they have not one single word. But by the time they're 1 or 2, they have now started to master the language. And they do that through their sense of hearing. We are in such a unique position right now as hearing care professionals to be able to help our patients with hearing loss flip that switch so that all of the information, whether it be soft speech, everything that they've been missing comes alive. And that's why we do what we do.
Dr. Oliver is so right when she says that's why we do what we do. If you have the time, check out the full video of the panel discussion where our experts geek out on precisely how the feedback system works and the level of tinnitus support that you can expect from Oticon. Thanks for taking the time to learn more about hearing, sensorineural hearing loss, and the new solutions offered to you through Oticon. Here's a taste of what we have in store for you in the next webisode.
Even for an overall moderate input level, so conversational level of speech, the high frequency parts of conversational level speech are actually soft. That's the soft parts of speech. And as you know, that's really where the really good stuff in speech occurs. As you know, the real good information in the speech signal is that mid to high frequency information, and that's soft speech. So when we talk about soft speech booster, it's not just about soft overall levels of speech. It's about soft and moderate overall levels of speech.
See you then.